As a wrestling fan, every once in a while you'll come across a special match. Not just something good, great, or even excellent, but a contest that changes how you look at pro wrestling and what you want from it. Something that challenges your most fundamental ideas of what you like and don't like about the art form. After my last mammoth of a video, I decided I wanted to try something new. For the first time on this channel, I'm going to discuss one very specific match that I can't stop talking about to anybody who will listen. Today, 10 or so months away from its 20th birthday at the time of recording, I want to spread the gospel of Crazy Crusher vs. Hellstorm. Why this match? I want to give a little bit of background about how I got into wrestling in the first place because it ties directly into why I love this match so much. As I mentioned in the Q&A video, I first got into watching this stuff through one of those WWE documentaries that they put on Netflix like 12 or 13 years ago. My first actual experience with pro wrestling comes a little bit before that though, with two separate instances. The first was finding a video of Kane dragging somebody beneath the ring when I was 7 or 8, which scarred me far more than I'd ever care to admit, and that Vice documentary about CZW that got really popular in the early 2010s. For most of my formative childhood years, I thought wrestling was either the scariest people on the planet trying to kill each other or a bunch of scrawny white dudes in t-shirts and pleather shorts doing amateur stunt work in a field. For the longest time, I thought the latter aspect of wrestling was one of its weakest, and part of me still does. I don't like big moves done for no reason with little connective tissue between spots, especially with how these matches are paced, and that's where a lot of lesser indie wrestling falls short for me. I especially despise when the folks involved in a plunder match take ages to set everything up. It makes it all feel that much more contrived and slows the pace down to a halt. This match didn't completely change my mind, as I still have issues with that sort of stuff, but it made me more appreciative of the real top-shelf bump freakage we see in companies like IWS. I'll talk way more about that later, but for now, let me introduce you to the competitors. Who are Crazy Crusher and Hellstorm anyways? We know damn near nothing about these French Canadians, and honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. It adds a level of mystique to the proceedings that you don't quite get from modern wrestling. Two completely unknown guys putting their bodies on the line for less than 200 people in attendance. What we do know is that, along with EWR, where this match takes place, both of these guys worked for the larger French-Canadian indie IWS. If you know anything about either of these companies, especially IWS, you know them because they birthed two of the best wrestlers in the 21st century, Kevin Steen and El Generico. They're not why we're here though. Interestingly enough, Crazy Crusher and Hellstorm are brothers, which brings another fascinating dimension to the brutality that follows. When I found that out, it gave me just enough context to understand why the violence is as egregious as it is. You can only do shit like that with a tag team partner or a sibling. We know especially little about the older brother of the two, Hellstorm. During his time in Elite Wrestling Revolution, he went up against some of the company's mainstays in the Arsenal and the formerly mentioned El Generico. Hellstorm's a pretty decent indie guy when he has a good partner next to him. He's also a big fan of Japanese wrestling according to his entrance, and that's putting it politely. I know way more about the younger of these two brothers, Crazy Crusher, than any normal person should. I wanted to talk about his story because he is one of the biggest what-ifs of the 2000s indie scene. He debuted in CZW a little bit after Steen and Generico did, but in his first match with the company, he broke his foot really badly and needed immediate hospitalization. If that freak injury doesn't happen, Crazy Crusher could have become one of the premier bump freaks of his era. He already was, based on the limited footage we have, but if we got more of him, especially in CZW, he would be number one with a bullet. His compatriots in XS69 and Sexy Eddie, two guys I think are significantly worse than Crusher at bump freakage, got full-time gigs with the Combat Zone. It's a damn shame we didn't get a Crusher run there. I would do anything to see that man in a cage of death. I also ought to mention that this is a sequel to their tournament match a month prior that I've never seen anybody talk about before. You probably won't believe me if you've only ever seen the ladder match, which is most people who have ever seen anything with Crazy Crusher and Hellstorm, but this one actually has a narrative running through it that's kind of good. In the first few moments, Crusher lands really badly on his knee after a moonsault, so Hellstorm does everything in his power to try and fuck his brother's knees up. Hellstorm more than lives up to his name by acting like a demon in the finish here, tying his brother's leg up in the rope, where one wrong twist could easily pop that knee out of its socket, if not much, much worse. It's not nearly as great or famous as the match I'm here to talk about, but some of the bumps in it are fucking marvelous. It's so good that I heavily considered fully analyzing that match in this video, making it way longer than I wanted it to be. I decided against that not just for my own sanity, but because the match commits one cardinal sin I can't bring my nitpicking ass to ignore in any match I ever watch. Whether the person doing it is Crazy Crusher, Rick Martel, Alexander Otsuka, or the legendary Manami Toyota, I cannot stand when someone gets their leg worked over for most of a match and convincingly sells it just to pop up and fly around the ring like nothing happened. There isn't a single thing that will take me out of a match quicker, especially when the legwork is as gruesome and damaging as it is in this encounter. I'd still recommend checking this out if you like the ladder match. The bumps are a marvel because Hellstorm has a remarkable eye for limb targeting. This was clearly a proof of concept for the ladder match, and it worked just well enough to serve as a fun prequel for what I'm about to discuss, especially if you're not as much of a stickler as I am. The only reason I know about this match in the first place is thanks to two separate yet equally important reviews that I really wanted to shout out here. Both Simon of Handwork fame and Eric Ritz from Segunda Caída have phenomenal pieces on this match. Check out both blogs in the description below if you haven't already. Handwork is a one-stop shop for the best writing on wrestling you're bound to see anywhere, and Segunda Caída is the best place to find recommendations if you're a freak like me. I'd like to deeply thank these publications and so many more, because without them I definitely wouldn't be the type of wrestling fan I am today. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants here, so if you want to see where I get a lot of my inspiration, please go check those blogs out. It's definitely worth your time. Now that you're fully aware of who these guys are and what their whole deal is, or at least as much as we know, let's get to the reason you're all here. Crazy Crusher vs. Hellstorm. Elite Wrestling Revolution Brutal Carnage, December 19th, 2004. All of the great writers who have talked about this match on the internet start their piece with some variation of what I'm about to say, and for good reason. It's the best disclaimer you could give somebody before they make the decision to go and watch this. To fully enjoy Crazy Crusher vs. Hellstorm, you have to turn your analytical wrestling brain off. I know that's pretty much the exact antithesis of what I do on this channel, but it's the only way to view this one to get the real immersive experience. Even if you can't quite turn your brain off for something like this, I'm going to explain why it kind of works for me on an analytical level. There are a dozen or more little flaws that would have destroyed a lesser match, but when the action is as heart-stoppingly excessive as it is here, you can ignore the trees for the forest. Earlier on in this video, I mentioned my distaste for big moves with little connective tissue between them and contraption spots that slow a match down to a halt, because this one is full of both. Still, I can't really bring myself to give enough of a shit to hold it against them. All possible complaints I could have about this match melt away like wax in the face of what these two sick individuals do to each other. The opening graphic itself is the first of many litmus tests to gauge if this is really your thing or not. If you see the X Games ass names involved on the most 2000s indie show name ever, Brutal Carnage, and the exact type of attire you'd expect these two to wear, you're more than likely to have one of two reactions. Most people's immediate response to this visual is a hearty chuckle over how much of a time capsule it is, dated to one exact point in time when 2000s indie wrestling was the most dangerous scene on Earth. Your second response entirely depends on how you feel about the aforementioned jackass-inspired, atrocious, bump-filled indie scene relegated mostly to French Canada, SoCal, and Philly. As someone who finds that kind of thing entertaining and funny, I'm far more inclined to enjoy this than those who think it's hokey or dated. Oddly enough, the actual wrestling portions in this thing, no matter how few and far between they are pretty good most of the time. The lockups feel intense, the punches look painful when they're thrown right, and both guys quote-unquote sell really effectively after some big moves, probably because they're unbelievably damaged. That's not to say the selling is always top-notch, great, or even good, but sometimes it's really effective. The wrestling part of things isn't why we're here either. We're here for carnage, and these two more than deliver in that front. I'm not going to rattle off the horrific things that these brothers inflict on one another, and hell, I'm not even going to show you most of the craziest stuff that happens here because you need to experience these bumps for yourself. I am going to break that rule once and only once, but we'll get there when we get there. This is a match best experienced on your own because few words can do it justice. I'm 1,000 of those suckers in and I'm still trying to figure out how to talk about it. Usually a chaotic spot fest where gravity does most of the work would be nothing more than a great music video. This match does make for a great music video, don't get me wrong. You might see how great later on. But this has a level of horrific tension that brings it above that criticism for me. Funnily enough, the best way they build that tension is during one of those construction spots I hate so dearly. Later on in the match, Crusher takes forever to set up a ladder stacked up on top of another ladder in maybe the most disgusting single weapon contraption a wrestler has ever conceived. When you watch Crusher set this thing up, you're filled with an immediate sense of dread. You know one of these two is about to take another gruesome fall in the next 120 seconds. You don't know who, you don't know how, but you know it's coming. This also nullifies my biggest complaint with spots like this, where the person who isn't building something is just lying on the floor for no reason. You know exactly why Hellstorm doesn't get to his feet until Crusher is completely finished building his monument to pain. Storm took one of the gnarliest bumps of all time seconds before the setup, one you'll just have to see for yourself. Another thing that brings this levels above pure music video territory is how important the audio is. During one spot at the very end of the match, a woman, very likely Crazy Crusher and Hellstorm's mother, starts screaming as if she approved of every disgusting spot before this moment. This is her breaking point. This. That's just one small piece of gold out of the dozens more I could highlight. The entire audiovisual experience is a treat you have to seek out for yourself. I also love that there's no commentators in sight here. Indie commentary in the 2000s, or kinda ever, isn't exactly the best outside of a few notable names. And I'm so glad there isn't a pair of French-Canadian doofuses losing their minds the whole time so we can actually hear what's going on. As I mentioned earlier, the fact that these two are complete question marks outside of this match is easily my favorite part of its presentation, if you can even call something like that presentation. It makes this match feel like two hardcore wrestling entities dropped from the sky exclusively for this and nothing else, just to disappear back into the smoke-filled ether they came from. We do have more footage of each guy, as I mentioned earlier, but I'm not sure any of it touches what they managed here. At least out of the stuff that made tape. As you can tell by the sheer amount of hours of video I've made on the topic, I'm an avid wrestling fan, and I'd like to say that very little in the ring can shock me. This match alone had 6 or 7 moments where I audibly went, oh no, they're not gonna do that, and they did an even worse version of what I imagined. Watching Crazy Crusher vs. Hellstorm for the first time made me gasp and scream more than any wrestling match I've seen before or since. The moment I truly fell in love with this match could only have happened if one of those guys did another overly long setup spot I usually can't stand. Crusher's going for some ridiculous move off the top of a ladder with another ladder wrapped around his waist. No idea what offensive move he can do from that position, and it goes a little something like this. Tell me you've seen anything remotely similar to that in wrestling before and I'll call you a liar. Even now when I'm recording this, I'm still thinking about something that's in the remotely same ballpark, and I'm drawing a blank. I don't even think I want to see anything remotely like this. That's another perfect example of how the erratic start and stop pacing with longer setups than usual for bigger moves works really solidly here to build tension. You know they're planning something, you have at least some idea of what they're planning, and you know it's not going to go well, so you're at the edge of your seat no matter what they do. Sure, it's more of a morbid car crash curiosity than emotional gravity, but goddammit, tension is tension. When I posted clips of this match on Twitter and hosted a live stream of more Crusher bump fests over here on my YouTube channel, people called it action figure pro wrestling. If you want my 4-word review of Crazy Crusher vs. Hellstorm, there it is. I love that people specified the difference between action figure wrestling and video game wrestling too. This couldn't be the latter because half the shit they do here isn't coded into any video game on the market. It's the stuff a hyperactive child playing with his wrestling figures would imagine. Trust me, I've always been one of them. But instead of plastic on plastic, it's human flesh and bone crushing into metal and linoleum. Even then, I don't know of an action figure on the market that can contort its body quite in the way that Crusher and Storm do. Think about that for a second. They bend themselves into positions that even action figures can't manage half the time. If that isn't enough incentive to watch this match for yourself, I don't know what will be. The intense danger here is a major reason that it holds up so well over the years. Ladder matches in the 2020s have that same throw as many spots together as possible mentality, but it's often too polished and samey for me to really sink my teeth into. I like my ladder spots with a bit of danger to them, a sense that something could and will go wrong at any moment, but somehow it works. No wrestler today is dumb or determined to destroy their bodies enough to replicate anything Crusher and Storm tried here. Do you think a mid-30s young buck or even Jordan Oliver would try something like this? Definitely not, and I really hope it stays that way. Not just for the wrestler's safety, but also selfishly to preserve the sanctity of these untouchable moments. With modern American wrestling's homogeneity, there's little to no chance of anything like this happening either way. The finale might leave some a little disappointed, especially those who expect a bump fest like this to end with the biggest possible fall, but I can't get enough of it. Hellstorm parkours his way over to a ladder, lines it up next to the one his brother's on, and eventually gets caught in a tree of woe in the ladder, which looks gruesome in an almost uncomfortable way. That ankle could snap so easily in that position. After 25 minutes of what the show's title promised, brutal carnage, the younger brother usurps his elder to retain the title. Even if it's not the most prodigious bump, the finish is awe-inspiring and done well enough that, yet again, I can't fathom faulting these two for it. This might have been an accident, but their finish was an amazing inverse from their match a month prior. This time, instead of Crusher, Hellstorm's leg gives out on him in the final moments in that tree of woe. If this was fully intentional, it's an incredible way to pay off what they built up in their tournament bout, and these two, shockingly enough, told a story in the final minute here. It's not complex or fleshed out by any means, but I can't help but love when someone gets their dastardly tactic thrown back in their face at the least opportune moment, Mid-South style. Crazy Crusher vs. Hellstorm doesn't end with a bang or a whimper, but somewhere in that beautiful gray area between them. The greatest ladder match ever? In the first really famous piece of writing on this match, Eric Ritz's incredible 1,200-word review of the thing, he posits two different hypotheses I have answers to. In my favorite portion of his review, Eric mentions the lack of traditional selling by explaining,
I guarantee you that if anybody were to contact Hellstorm or Crazy Crusher today, they would still be selling this match. It is merely our fault that we did not appreciate their long-form selling enough. When it's rainy and Crazy Crusher's joints make it hard for him to grip, he's selling this match. When Hellstorm can't pivot his head to talk to the person next to him, he's selling this match.
As someone in contact with Crazy Crusher today, someone who can see his posts about the awful injuries he got from this business, Eric couldn't have hit the nail on the head any more. Nobody wins a match like this, and both guys were lucky to survive it without any immediate injuries. These brothers, like any pair of siblings, will feel the effects of what they've done to each other for the rest of their lives. In an addendum at the bottom of the review, Eric mentions that
there is a great chance they didn't get paid money
for this match. Yet again, as someone in contact with Crazy Crusher, I can assure you that they didn't see a single cent from it. Still, he says he wouldn't take any of it back if people are as enthralled by the match as I am. That's some next level love of the game right there. Crazy Crusher vs. Hellstorm is, at its core, the ethos of one very specific wrestling style boiled down to its most spectacular elements. It's also the best possible version of what I imagined wrestling was when I was a child. Gross indie brutality from two guys you've probably never heard of that fills me with a completely different kind of fear than the Kane video when I watch it. The reason I call it the best ladder match ever is because that's what I think it is. No other ladder match takes what you initially think two people can do with a normal household and construction tool in a wrestling ring and throws it out the window just to give you something more awe-inspiringly devastating than anything you've ever witnessed. Nobody in the business is, or probably should be, willing to take the punishment these guys put themselves through. When you go from watching the mass production line that is the modern ladder match to something like this, you will never want to go back. Crazy Crusher vs. Hellstorm is a brilliant little time capsule of everything good, bad, and ugly about the mid-2000s indie scene. Watching it changed how I view great wrestling. I can guarantee that this one won't be for everybody, but everybody has to at least try it out. You may not love it as much as I do, and I don't expect many people to, but you'll get something out of it. I don't know what that something will be, but all I can say is I hope your first experience with it is as magical as mine was. If you're strong, brave, and sick enough, it just might be. Thank you for watching another one of my videos. I've wanted to talk about this match on the channel for months, and I'm so happy I finally got the chance to. I really hope you enjoyed. Before I finish up here, some thank yous are in order. Major shoutouts to my buddies Corey and Cake for voicing over Eric's review towards the end. And yet again, go out of your way to read Handwork and Segunda Caída ASAP. This video wouldn't exist without them. If you know anything about me or this channel, you know I have another massive project planned for the near future already, so stay tuned for announcements on that. They're coming soon. Thank you again for watching. I really hope you check this one out and it gives you some sort of idea about why I love it so much. Link to it in the description. Alright, if you want to see the spots that badly, here you go.
Thoughts flap their wings and fly, and I can still take